Welcome once again to the most missed free Flutter course on the entire internet. And of course, the reason I say it is the most missed free Flutter course is because we have been missing for the past month. But we are back now, and yeah. So I do want to mention a few things before we begin. First of all, I've had a few people ask for contact details like Twitter or anything like that. And I decided I am going to share it in the description below. I don't really use Twitter. I do have Facebook, but I don't use it often at all. So I'm going to just put my LinkedIn and my Instagram. Instagram is the social media I use the most. You guys can follow me if you want. If you don't want to, then don't do it. Entirely up to you. I don't mind. But yeah, so aside from that, let's talk about what we're going to do in the next couple of videos. So in the last video, I mentioned that I wanted to complete that app we were making with Redux. However, I did go over the important things in Redux. The only thing the rest of the app would have done was just show Redux again, or show more examples of Redux, but I wasn't going to introduce any new concepts. And on top of that, I just haven't touched that app in, well, a month since the last time I was recording. So as a result, I'm hesitant to go back to it because it's never really fun to go back to some kind of app you haven't touched or looked at in a long time. So instead of that, what we're going to do is jump into the next part, which is the BLoC. In this module, we've gone over several things already. We've gone over provider, getX, Redux, and BLoC is the final state management that I want to go over. And we're going to do that through a quick sign-in demo. It's not a real sign-in because it's not going to be connected to any kind of backend, but it's going to be good. We're going to look at BLoC in a few different ways because when it comes to BLoC, so BLoC is actually the OG, the original state management solution for Flutter. However, it can be a bit complicated. It can be a bit complex. There's quite a lot of boilerplate. So people started preferring other things. I don't know if you guys have actually watched the original talk in which the Flutter guys introduced provider. But if you guys pay attention to the first couple of minutes, they do mention that they still recommend BLoC for most people, but because it's complicated, they decided to also recommend provider as an easier alternative. So yeah, now there are a few different ways of doing BLoC. We could make our own custom one. We're not going to do that. It's going to be a lot of extra work for what I believe is not a lot of extra payoff. Instead, we're going to use the package Flutter BLoC to help us make a BLoC in Flutter. And yeah, there are also a couple of differences between the implementations. We could use just the classes by themselves, which is the way we're going to do it in this video. And in the next video, we'll have a look at a different way of doing it, which is to use the freeze package to create a freeze union, which has a few different benefits. It kind of helps us with some things. Additionally, we can either hold data in the different classes, or we could have a single class which we change and which holds all the data, kind of like a provider. But yeah, we're going to look at both those. In today's video, we'll have the different classes, and they're not actually going to hold any data. Those different classes will be the different data, whereas in the next video, we'll have different data which can change held in a specific state class. But yeah, that's going to be that. And once we're finished with these couple videos, that's going to be it for this module. So at the end of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the videos I recorded, put them into a single massive video, which is going to be probably about 7-8 hours long, and upload that. Because I know some people, myself, for example, I prefer really long videos. If, you know, I'm following Rezo Coda on my personal YouTube, and the first thing that attracted to me, the reason I found him, was because he put the 7-hour TDD course. And when I saw that, I thought, this is the guy I want to follow. So yeah, those of you that have been following me for a long time, there'll be no need to watch that 7-8 hour, however long it is, video, because it is just going to be everything we've done until now, but it's just there for the new people. But yeah, so let's jump in. So we are speaking about the BLoC today, and let's go ahead and look at the BLoC pattern. So this is, of course, the original package. We're going to be using Flutter BLoC to help us along. And if we look at this, it will show us the data flow. And I do want to mention there is a reason why we are doing BLoC last, and that is because of the additional complexity. And there is a very good reason why we're doing this after Redux, because anybody that has worked with Redux, and especially in JavaScript, will really see a lot of similarities. BLoC is obviously based on Redux, but it's just made specifically for Dart and for Flutter. But let's take a quick look at this, and let's quickly read the overview. So they say the goal of this package is to make it easy to implement the BLoC design pattern, which is called business logic component, right? And this design pattern helps to separate presentation from business logic. Following the BLoC pattern facilitates testability and reusability. This package abstracts reactive aspects of the pattern, allowing developers to focus on writing the business logic. So this is really interesting because it's not just a state management solution like the other things, Provider or GetX. What they're designed to do is just hold your states and share your states in your different apps. But this is doing that, but not just that. One of the big benefits to this is to separate the presentation from the business logic. Now, in my own apps, I use BLoC the most often. It is my favorite state management solution for this reason. But one of the big things I want you guys to understand about BLoC is if you come in just thinking you want a state management solution and that's it, then you probably aren't really going to understand it, because there's all this added complexity and you'll be thinking, why am I doing this? You know, what is the purpose in doing all of this? Well, this is the purpose. It's about the separation of concern, having them in different things. It's about testability, reusability, and really just the separation of concerns, which is something that if you want clean architecture is very, very important. But of course, in your easier, smaller apps, there isn't really too much use in doing this. And if we quickly look at this, so this is essentially what the BLoC looks like. We have some kind of function, which is going to be some kind of event, and then something happens inside this BLoC, we don't know what. And then as a result, a state is going to be emitted. And if we scroll further down, we can see this in a bit more detail. So we have event, we add that, and whatever happens inside the BLoC, we don't really know. And then the state comes out. And here are the different functions. We're not going to use all of these. A lot of these are abstracted away from us. What we will use is map event to state. This is just something that connects the different events and contains all the logic, and then actually spits out the state as a result. And of course, you guys will probably recognize this as being really, really similar to the Redux pattern of having events come in, stuff happens, and then state comes out. One of the big differences between Redux and BLoC is that Redux doesn't hold too much logic. If you put your logic in the reducers, you're not really doing it correctly. You can put a lot of logic inside the middleware, but then the middleware is kind of like this, additional thing. Redux is a more pure state management solution like the others that we spoke about, whereas BLoC takes that idea from Redux and then adds more business logic inside. So it gives us that nice separation. But again, you can really see that it's based on Redux just from that data flow. So yeah, that is that. We're not going to worry too much about what a qubit is. Essentially, it's just some kind of stream which allows us to emit different states, but we're not going to be working with qubits ourselves. It's just done for us under the hood. And then we're going to be using the Flutter BLoC package, which again just has different abstractions, which just hides away some of the details so that we can focus on what we actually want to build. And a BLoC is going to have a few different things we're going to need. First, we're going to need a BLoC provider, which is here. And you might, of course, recognize this word provider. We used it when it came to Redux. We used it when it came to the provider package, obviously, because originally BLoC was entirely separate, but provider ended up being such a good package that the people who made BLoC decided, you know, let's just use this. Let's use provider under the hood. So whenever you are using BLoC, you are also using a provider package, but we don't have to install it ourselves because it's going to be there for us automatically. The BLoC provider is going to be, you know, that's parent widget, which actually gives the BLoC to everything else. Inside it's going to have the create function and it's going to have some kind of child. Then to actually use the BLoC, we have 3 main different methods, which is, I'll just search for it. The first one is going to be BLoC builder, and that was, yeah. So what BLoC builder does is it takes the type BLoC as a generic and the state, and then it gives us a function, a builder, which takes the context and the state, therefore allowing us to use that state and the different variables the different data state has, so we can actually read that data. Then we have BLoC listener, which I spelled wrong. Now what BLoC listener is going to do is BLoC listener is going to add this listener function, which again is a function which has the context and the state and allows us to react to that state. It allows us to do something in response to that state. So whereas the BLoC builder allows us to read the data, to display it or whatever, the BLoC listener is what allows us to actually react to that state. And finally, we have a BLoC consumer. And a BLoC consumer isn't actually anything new. It's just a wrapper around the BLoC builder and the BLoC listener. So it's those 2 widgets combined into a single widget. It's as if we had a BLoC listener and the child is a BLoC builder, and like that. We just wrap into a single thing. So it gives us the listener and the builder, which is exactly the same as the previous 2. And of course, we did mention the provider. We do also have a multi-BLoC provider, which again, it's the same thing as the BLoC provider. The only difference is that it allows us to add more than 1 block, which is actually something we will be using in this video. And then finally, I haven't searched for this before. Okay, so I can't seem to find it right now. I was just going to show the different files we need. When we create these files, we're going to get a BLoC, we're going to get the events, and we're going to get the states. We're going to do different things in response to those. Okay, so let's take a look at our starting project, and let's make this a bit bigger. Let's make this a lot bigger. I'm just trying to get rid of my terminal, but it doesn't want to go. I'll just do it that way. Okay, so this is the starting projects I have. It has some things, but not too much. I haven't made it look nice. I just have my main screen here, and in my main screen, it just says sign in demo. I have my different routes, which is going to be my splash screen, my home screen, and my sign in screen. The default screen we go to is going to be the splash screen, but doesn't really contain anything yet. Then we can look at the different screens on the different side here. So home, the only thing this does is it displays some text in the center which says you are now signed in. So obviously we're going to see this after we sign in. Now for the sign in page, and none of this is hooked up. So if you try to use it this way, it's not going to really do much. This just has some text like a banner which says sign in. And then it has 2 text fields, which again, right now they don't do anything. And finally a flat button which says sign in, but again, it's not hooked up to anything. And finally the splash screen. And all the splash screen is going to do is return a scaffold which has a sensor and a circular progress indicator. So that's the little wheel thing which spins around. And finally, what we have is our auth repository. So this might look a little bit strange, and this auth repository is not something. So this specific one is not something you would use in your real app because everything is just hard coded over here. What I've done here, and don't worry if you don't understand it too much, I've created a singleton, which basically means whenever I create an auth repository, do not create new new of repositories just creates a single one, right? That's what's going on here. That's why I have a static final of repository of facade, which I'm going to rename to of repository. Originally, I was going to call it of facade, but I renamed it. And that's going to be of repository.internal. And then we have a factory. When we try to make a new of repository, it's just going to return this of repository, which is defined right here, which is here. So it doesn't really have anything. And then we have the static bool authenticated is equals false. So this is what I mean by everything here is hard coded. You're not going to use this in a real app. You would use it of repository, but not this specific one. So authenticated is marked as false. Then I have a function is user authenticated, which is just going to return this authenticated value. And finally, well, two more. I have a sign in with email and password, which is going to take an email. It's going to take a password. And right now I've just hard coded these to say if the email is my email and the password is just password, we're going to set the authenticated value over here to true, and we're going to return true. So that's basically as if we were signed in. On the other hand, if we have the wrong email, if we have the wrong password, then we're going to set this to false if it isn't already, and return false to mean we're not signed in. And finally, register with email and password is just going to return true. We don't really have any checks. Now, if this was a real app, you would have similar methods, but rather than doing this, you'd probably access some kind of backend. You might use Firebase, or you might use whatever other backend. And once you get that value, you will emit or return true, false, or oftentimes the user data. Oftentimes what I would do is return the email address of the signed in user or something like that. But again, here we're just displaying kind of something much simpler. And similar thing with register an email password. Right now we're just returning true, but if this was a real, real app, what you would do is actually in this function access that backend and register the user. And we will do that in the future, just not in this module. Okay, so that is all of this of repository, main, and signing page, right? So the first thing we need to do here is to use that BLoC provider we mentioned. Well, actually, the first thing we need to do is to look into our pubspec.yaml and add the different packages we need. So I'm just going to pull this up, and I'm going to add a Flutter block. And I believe that if you have Flutter block, you no longer need to add the block by itself, but I could be wrong. Before you did need to add both of them, but now we're in, I think it's Flutter block 6.0 or something. We've come quite a long way since the first one. So I have that, and I know I need some other things, but I can't remember what. I think I need the other packages for the next video. So for this one, we'll just leave it like that. Okay. I'm going to wrap my material app in a widget, and I'm going to use a multi-block provider. And currently there is no block. So yeah, there's that. And my multi-block provider is going to take providers, which is going to be a list of block provider. And that's going to have a create function, which currently, I don't have any blocks. So let's go ahead and create something. We're going to be using a package, an extension, which I've already added to myself. But if you guys don't have this package, go ahead and install it. It's BLoC by Felix Angelov. And that's, you can get it through the extensions tab over here. Just search BLoC. Currently we're on 5.3.1, but if you're watching this in the future, then you can have a different version. So yeah, if you have that, what you can do is just control click on lib, or right click for people who use different operating systems, and hit here BLoC, new block. And in fact, I'm going to make a folder first and say BLoC, and then BLoC, new block, object block. And you can see it created 3 different files. I'm gonna take these and move them into this folder because it creates a different folder for us, and I don't necessarily, in fact, I'm gonna move them back, but I'm gonna rename this folder to be called off-check block. Okay guys, and there is quite a lot of noise outside, so I'm gonna end the video here, and I'll either come back to recording this afterwards, or if not, I will have a new video. We'll see how I feel. It's already getting 20 minutes long, so yeah, we'll see. All right guys, so we'll leave it here for now. So we'll just have this first video as an introduction to BLoC. Now, as long as there isn't too much noise outside, I am going to record the rest of the BLoC videos today and just release them tomorrow and the next day, because I do think they're going to be 3 different videos in this series, but we will see. Okay, so for now, myself and Vidius, I'm going to head out. See you guys next time.